Hey, I'm Nick DiMatteo, and welcome to Music is Not a Genre, the interview edition. Every week, I talk about music, I break it down, I bust myths, I connect genres, I talk about how genres are not the way music is defined. I connect music to my own music, to other people's music, and to other things in the world. Thank you to everyone who has subscribed, clicked, and shared, and read and watched and listened. And if you're a Patreon subscriber, especially, thank you very much for that. And if you've donated blood to me, that's wonderful. Thank you as well. I'm glad to know you. And I hope you stick around because today's guest I'm very excited about. I have with me here James Castelli. He is a composer, performer. He's a teacher. He is a doctor. We'll talk about that. An astronomer, an astrophotographer, a vintner, and my second cousin once removed. I once removed him from a party because he wasn't behaving well. I don't know. It sounds like an old joke. I have no idea. How are you today?
I'm doing fine. How are you?
Pretty good. Pretty good. You know, it's been a little cold today in our various areas. You're in New Jersey, South Jersey, right? I am in New York, of course, but I'm doing pretty well. So we are related, yes, and I want to hear a little more about that, but that isn't quite how we know each other because this is actually the first time that we are, in a sense, meeting face to face.
Yes, indeed. I thought about that because it's like, yeah, I wasn't sure if we even talked on the phone. We've talked a lot online, messages, YouTube, and Facebook and whatnot. I've met some other close relatives of yours, but
Right.
we've actually crossed paths face to face yet. So
No, not in any way like this, not phone. Yeah. How now, do you recall how we got in contact with each other?
well, I imagine it might have been through Facebook, if I'm not um,
Sounds right.
at this point, it's been probably a few years. We've been connected. Um, I probably was talking to, I guess, your mother first, and was getting some information. And so, when I do my research, I reach out to a lot of family members who, because a lot of the older generation are gone, so I missed kind of the chance to get a lot of information. So I kind of find myself looking on each branch of the tree, and it's a quite a big, big task, a big tree, and so I think your mother and father were gave me a lot of information a few years, 3 or 4 years ago, and so I became friends with them, and so I saw a bunch of other DiMatteos, and so start friend requests and receiving them, and so you were in there somewhere.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
don't think it was, I
somehow.
don't think it was initially a musical. I think that kind of came about later, sharing some stories and interests.
I think you're right. Yeah, and I do recall that my mother was somehow involved in that. But just to catch people up, this research you're doing is for a pretty extensive family tree. Now, I've done a family tree on Ancestry.com, and there are a few hundred people on that tree, and I'm pretty proud of that. But you are have a tree of well over 4,000 members at this point.
Hmm.
How
Yes.
far back does it go?
Well, there is, if it's correct, there is one lineage on my father's side that goes back to around 1610, but most of it goes only back to the late, mid 1800s, because but it's getting better. The more stuff that's uploaded over there in the old country, you can kind of, it's like a paper trail once you just start, um, you know, following the trail of the birth certificates, and they'll list who the parents are. And most of the time they stayed in one town and didn't travel around too much. So
Right.
but it's wider than it is deep. I mean, to get that many people, you have
Yeah.
when you have all the brothers and sisters of great grandparents or great great grandparents, that's where things really explode.
Yeah, I see what you mean. Have you ever actually, I can't imagine you've actually drawn this tree though, right?
Well, yes, but not by hand. Using Family Tree Maker, I've printed out scrolls, and I think I was pointing to it earlier.
Oh yeah.
I know that your family has seen it. It kind of just, I could coat the walls with it. There's, uh, I'm pretty sure your branch would be like a piece of paper. It's like 20 feet long, because
Oh my God.
your grandfather was one of 8 siblings, and each of those have have a branch about that big.
Right, right.
So just going back to Giuseppe, um, that's really what that box is all about. It's the DiMatteos. Of course, that's one of 8 pairs of great great grandparents I have. So
Yeah, yeah.
it's
God.
but the whole thing has never been printed. But Family Tree Maker, which syncs with Ancestry.
Hmm.
So if I'll do work in there, I can upload it to ancestry.com and invite people to see it if they're so inclined or if they ask me questions. But
I'm gonna have to take a look at it. I don't think I've ever actually seen your tree on Ancestry, so.
you'll probably say, "Why you use that picture of me?"
I
Yes, I have pictures.
haven't-
I went
That's
down
fine.
that rabbit hole. I think it looks so much cooler with having pictures.
I love that. Yeah.
I mean, it makes it more personal, and you can see the resemblances. And
There is a one of my favorite older, artists. Well, it's not that far back in history, was Norman Rockwell, and he did a painting of a family tree. And I don't know who the models were that he used, but he went back, I don't know, 6, 7, 8 generations, and he was so meticulous in how he showed the family resemblances and the certain, features and traits, even down to like a certain sparkle in the eye or something like that. I've always, just that painting itself has always fascinated me, and I think it's because I've always been fascinated with lineage and family trees and ancestry.
I don't know, it's addictive. It's a lot of work, and I know it's something that will never be finished. By
Yeah.
definition, it will. So I get people calling me, oh, bad news or good news. Someone born, married, or But some people, I gotta knock on the door and say, hey, any. I've been talking to you in 5 years. Anything I should know about? Any new family members or
Wow.
so?
I think it's amazing work that, I think any family who has at least one person like you doing work like this is lucky, because it's not, like you said, it's work that never ends. Speaking of work that never ends, you do quite a bit of work on many things, and I think, with that intro and how we're related, and all of that being said, I think it's a good time to give you an opportunity to tell everyone your story
Oh boy.
as far back as you want to go, whatever you want to include. Let people know what you're about, what you do, any whatever you want to highlight.
Well, I mean, should I give a particular slant to music since
You can. I mean, I think, well, the thing is, we're going to talk about music quite a bit, and I'm excited about that. But feel free to throw in anything else that you feel strongly about. I think there are people out there. What I like about what we do, and what I try to do with all of these podcasts, is connect music to other things in the world anyway. And it's, I think, nice to kind of illustrate that most people, who are creative people, do more than one thing. And having mentioned that you are, into astronomy and do things with that, and Jim has his own winery that he, wine that's won awards.
A vineyard. I mean, I'm not a winery yet. I make my own wine, but I'm not.
Okay, you're not quite okay. So yeah, so I would say it doesn't all have to be about music. Just go ahead and whatever feels good.
All right. Well, back in 1972, great year for music.
Yes.
Um, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of great. It's like, wow, I got Stevie Wonder, Superstition, Chicago Saturday in the Park, and if you look at the hits that were out that year, is some good stuff. But I made my debut, and I was the first of three children. I have two younger sisters, and my father was a farmer, so a lot of happy memories. That's probably where I'm always growing things, so not just the vineyard. I mean, the house is filled with plants, tropical things. I got coffee trees and cocoa and mangoes and jackfruits and things. But I mean, I was always, planting weeds and things, in this spare time at the farm. But, learning to drive a tractor, working in the packing house. So those are my childhood memories when I wasn't being a nerdy kid at school, looking in encyclopedias, researching insects and planets and geography. And so a lot of people thought I was going to be a scientist or something when I was growing up because of what I was reading. But somehow I was always, I guess I was banging things. I don't know what I was using, but I was kind of destroying pieces of furniture. I remember there was an old 8-track cassette case. Remember 8 tracks?
Oh yeah.
I don't think it was real leather, but it was square, like a little lunchbox, but it held about 28 tracks. But it had a really good thuddy sound, and I would always be drumming along. I guess I must have gotten some kind of, I can't remember what I was using, if I got drumsticks from somewhere. So my parents said, we got to get this kid drums. So I think it was my 8th or 9th birthday. I got a drum set, and so that was the beginning of my odyssey, taking lessons and making a lot of noise. But very soon I realized I wasn't just interested in just playing the drums. I wanted to create something, which is something I never really understood when I'm teaching a lot of students, that they're just happy to play the notes or just play something that someone else wrote. I just had this, I don't know where that came from, that I wanted to make something.
Mm-hmm.
So if you imagine that a kid who can barely play the drums and you want to write a song and you can't really sing, there's no, so that was my first problem. Was I don't know why I wanted to write music if I didn't have a piano yet. So but I had a little cheesy tape recorder, probably from the who knows when this thing was. Well, it sounded terrible, very hissy, and a lot of very cheap microphone. I would get cassettes and I would write lyrics out, and I would play the drums, and I would do this thing where I would get one cassette player and play back, and through the speakers. And so if the drums were playing over the speakers, I would have the microphone on the other cassette player recording the play. So this is how I overdubbed.
Yeah.
It sounds horrible, but I thought it was pretty cool. I didn't know any other way to do it. So, and probably 83, 84, I did a few, but most of those are lost. So my first surviving recording is from 85. And the first few of them, it's just my voice and drums, if you can imagine, of like a 12, 13-year-old. And
nice. Wow.
And a couple years actually, I think the year after that, my parents got at an auction, I think for $100, an upright piano that's still at their house. And so I would spend most of my time, I would come home from school and I'd be on there for 2-3 hours. I mean, I practiced more than I ever, practiced even today. I mean, I was getting pretty good at piano. And so then we have harmony and melody going on in the music. So, and I'd team up with some guys from high school when that stage came, and they would come over, and it was and so it would always be about, okay, what can we record, and there'd always be some song that would come out of it, instrumental or rock song or something. So I'd have piano pieces, I'd have drum solos, I'd have comedy skits. My friends would come over. So anything, you said my music is not a genre. There is no genre. If you listen to my stuff, it's like you have like kids making, like cracking themselves up, laughing, making some comedy skit. Then you'd have some semi-serious piano thing. Then you'd have this god awful 20-minute drum solo where I don't know what I'm doing. And then you'd have something that sounds like an actual song, but it's horribly sung because I'm out of tune. And that's, and away I went. And so I was very productive, very high the quantity was high, the quality was low, but I was very, I was driven to do this. And so, was, in choir in high school. So that actually, my senior year of high school is where I kind of, because I joined a select choir. And that was the first time I kind of had a better idea of how to start singing, getting more comfortable with my voice. Mm-hmm. But really, it's not until the past couple of years, so like 30 years after that, because I've always been uncomfortable with my voice. So I write these songs that are more for a crooner to sing, because I like prog, I like jazz rock and fusion and all this stuff. But when I actually write a song, I find like the best way to melody is this, if you're dealing with power chords, I find I can't do all these complex harmonies and versions with stacked, 13ths and whatever. And so the style of music I write isn't best suited for my voice. And so most of what I do, I feel like is just demos that ideally someone else would cover for me. But I think in the past couple of years, I've really kind of figured out how to trick people into thinking I know I'm singing decently. But, college, that's when things got serious. And suddenly you start hearing string quartets and pieces for orchestra, percussion ensemble, and woodwind quintet and choirs. And I started, so my degree is basically music education. Mm-hmm. And then I kept going, and that's where I got my, as you mentioned, a doctorate in composition when I went to Miami for that. But that was just to keep going as far as that would go. Probably what I should have done is what most people do is you get your bachelor's, you get a teaching job, and then you go to night school or something.
Yeah.
And I felt like I couldn't imagine doing that. I couldn't imagine teaching kids all day and then go to night school and I don't know. So I just kept going, and I've been teaching in some form or fashion, whether it's student teaching or substitute teaching, or a few years I was full-time public school teacher. I did some adult classes, adult education for astronomy, private lessons. So from pre-K to 80 years old, I've had students of all ages, but mostly it's music. And wow. Well, I'm not sure if I kind of rambled a bit, but
not at all. I have so many notes already. But how did you get involved in astronomy?
Well, interestingly, when I graduated from college in 2001, after getting my doctorate, that is, my first, when I got my bachelor's was like 96. I got my first teaching job. I was suddenly making money that I hadn't seen before or since. And it's like, so I had a friend, and we would always have, you say we're going to have a long conversation, but I would have conversations that would go on all night long, what if and philosophical conversations. And so the scientist in me, we would, rereading books on how the universe started, and these big questions of, Einstein and relativity and how, light speed and all this. And so it's like, what? I want to understand how this, like, I just don't want to hear conceptually that I'm looking at a star and it's, 1,000 light years away. I want to actually, I want to connect with it more. I want to see these things for myself. So I purchased a telescope, and I caught the bug. That's what I do. I get interested in something, and then I'm, whole hog into it. And of course, you can't just look at the things. You have to take pictures of it. So then how do you attach a camera to it? And then of course the Earth is turning. So if you take a picture of something in space while the Earth is moving, unless you find some way to counteract the Earth's rotation, you get streaks. And you can actually make star trail photos that do that. And I have some of that stuff on my YouTube channel. That's taking advantage of the Earth turning as you see the arcs that the stars trace out in the night sky. But, from about 2003, that's when I really got into that. And so I was in the local South Jersey club. It was like the secretary for a while. I never, going to meetings and hosting star parties, camping out. I would travel to remote parts of the United States, northern Pennsylvania, go out to Arizona. Went out to Hawaii once, and the furthest I went was to Chile. Was the last vacation I ever took because I wanted to see the southern. Because all this time I was only seeing half the sky.
Right.
So all those fun southern constellations and regular clusters and galaxies, and so I really got into that. But since then, there's so much light here on the East Coast, between New York and Philadelphia, that it's really hard to find a place where you can really appreciate. And because if you just take a telescope and you look at anything except a planet or the moon, it's like a gray smudge, and it's not very exciting to, hey, come look at this. It's like this, you see like, what am I looking at? And you see like a few hazy stars or a gray smudge, like a little puff of smoke or something. It's like, yeah, that's the Orion Nebula. And they're like, okay. Show a picture of it, see the colors and the shapes and all that. That's another reason why I take a picture, is like you can get a good exposure for like a half hour. It's like having your eye open, getting all these photons and stacking it, and you can really, that's what astronomy photography is really about, is capturing as many photons as you can and kind of canceling out all the light pollution from that's what it's called, light pollution.
Right. Yeah, I've heard that phrase. The closest I've come to that kind of vision was I've been out to Arizona a few times, and Grand Canyon at night or something like that, where there is really almost no light pollution, depending where you are, and it's so different. It's so different than what we see here.
Yeah, the Milky Way for the first time. I think I was traveling with some friends in Europe. I kind of on a whim went, and I was I think little country of Andorra between Spain and France. We were kind of just riding around. We're up in the not the Alps, whether it's the Pyrenees or something. And we got out. We said, let's stop the car. It's at night in the mountains. We got up, and it was almost like a religious experience just to see. That was the first time I really saw such dark skies with so many stars that, if you go out and look at this any clear night, imagine that times 1,000 more stars. It was so that kind of planted the seed years before. And anyway, so that's
breathtaking. It's breathtaking. Yeah.
So that was a little detour.
No, that's great. And we'll be making a few more detours for sure. But I wanted to go back to something that you mentioned, which I think this is always interesting to me, because I'm a creator and a musician and all of that. And of course, as we work with, as you said, other people who are musicians, but maybe don't have that urge to create anything themselves.
Right.
And I've always found that interesting. It's not even something, it doesn't necessarily puzzle me, because there is a sense that when you're a performer or a leader in some sense, where you're kind of taking ownership of yourself in front of other people, you have to put yourself out there. And I've been hired for bands where I'm just the bass player, or just the guitar player, or whatever it is. And there's a certain kind of freedom there to where you can just be in the pocket doing what you're doing. And you're not the main focus of attention, nor is the thing that you're playing. You're playing someone else's material, whatever that may be. So there is a real sense, not wanting to create is something that I can understand, because you're kind of, you're not somebody who wants to be that far out of yourself and to put yourself out like that. But what do you think it is that makes you in particular, or anyone, need to create themselves?
Well, you had mentioned being in a band. I mean, I most of the performances I've done live were, in college. It would be things like I'd be part of a percussion ensemble. Like very rarely I'd be in an actual, rock band where we're going into a bar, and playing stuff. And a lot of times they were cover bands, but invariably, like these guys, this was a cassette, a little band I was in the early 90s, High Risk. And we did originals. So, we would try to find covers that we liked doing, or I would kind of try to suggest originals that were more, my cup of tea than, a lot of the power, stadium rock that was, big at that time.
Mhm.
So, but I always find like, well, oh, we're doing a cover. This was like, yes, this is something that most people wouldn't have heard before. Um, so even when I was, in that sense, just playing keyboards in a band, what really got me excited was doing something original. I mean, I like doing covers. If it's something I like doing, I like, playing good songs. I mean, music is music, but just the idea of creating something, I don't know. It's just, I don't think I've analyzed it that correctly, because I do a lot of cooking too, and I can't follow a recipe to save my life. I have recipes, I have all these books, but it's like life is an improvisation. It's like, what's in the fridge? Let's throw it together. It's like, here's some notes. Make some sounds. Like, what can I make with this? What hasn't been heard before?
I love that. I love that.
I'm not sure if I have thought through, well, does the world really want to hear what I come up with?
Well,
But obviously, after all this time, that's the part of my life that really hasn't made me the most money, or if any at all. It's more of a passion when I do it. But life does get in the way, and so
yeah.
sometimes I think there was an 8-year hiatus where I didn't do any recordings, and I thought, well, I guess that part's done, and suddenly I kind of
Oh,
got back in the game again.
couldn't let
Years
it
ago.
go. Yeah.
Yeah, between 2008 2016, I think there were a couple, like I would do one thing, but I always like to think of it in terms of albums, like having a collection of songs. So it took me a while to get back in, things rolling. So now once every 2 or 3 years, before I would do originally I was doing like an album every month when I was in high school. So I've slowed down quite a bit, but
Well, yeah. That actually answers, or semi answers, one of the questions I like to ask, which is the first one that's coming out over several, which I have to write down here, just this one thing. But your most recent album, and we're going to have links for all this stuff for the astrophotography and just everything. So you can all check this stuff out too, is called 103 Degrees Fahrenheit, right?
yes. Well, actually, I never given much thought how you would say it.
Yeah, well, yeah, right.
Fahrenheit 103. 103 because it's the 103rd album. This is where
There you go. That's it. Yep.
And so one of my I should have mentioned somewhere in my musical odyssey, back when I discovered the parents' 8-track drawer, there was all the Barry Manilow and Neil Diamond, and that I kind of, that's another reason why I guess I'm melodically and harmonically inclined. You listen to
Oh yeah.
that, you're not going to be doing power chords. But very soon after that, I got into Chicago. That was quite a jump. And I was very enamored with the way they numbered their albums, like classical music would be. And also they had this a logo, an insignia. So the famous Chicago logo that they had that was supposed to imitate the I think the Coca-Cola in
Right.
design
I think
was
so. Yeah.
and so it wasn't so the like that represented the music, and it wasn't about the individual members. So that's because so I would just kind of I made a little symbol and I would kind of decorate it in different scenarios. How many different ways could I
Yeah.
envision it? So you know the symbol doesn't appear on this one, except for the fact that it's part of the title.
Right.
But the way I've worked into the number of the album was that, you know, a temperature on a thermometer. And the fact that this was my pandemic album, now in retrospect, it's like I have this poor sick kid on the cover. That's not even me. It was supposed to be me. But unfortunately, I seem to have misplaced a photo that had me laying on the couch when I was a little kid, you know, watching UHF channels. That's what I would, you know, do in the old, you know, Gilligan's Island and all that.
Oh yeah. Well,
So
that would have been cool. But it's interesting that the album you titled the album that way with that kind of cover, and you say it's your pandemic album. Did you intend it to be that related to it?
no, actually, I thought with 103, that sounded like the number that was a pretty high temperature that you would want to take seriously if that was your bodily temperature. Um,
Yeah.
I don't know. It's something I hadn't done before, so I, you know, it's just the concept. Now, I don't think you know musically there's not many of my albums are concept albums.
Right.
I mean,
Right.
sometimes I work it into it somehow, but like the first track mentions it. If you can even hear what
Yeah.
I'm saying in the later.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember that. Yeah.
Um,
Well, it's, and to me, it's almost, I find this is the case with a lot of artists, especially people like you who do so many other things. The ideas that come to you that consciously are just unrelated, you start to find connections to other things in them. And in this case, well, sure, maybe conceptually there was nothing about the pandemic in here, but there was some part of your brain subconsciously maybe that's like, well, 103 is a high fever, which not only has to do to me with illness, but it's that sense of like, this music is hot. It's so hot, it's boiling. Like you're boiling your blood. And I've listened through to the whole album as well as many other of his works. You really should check it out. And I love that you mentioned Chicago, because I didn't know that was that connection with the numbers and your symbol, but it makes perfect sense. And they've always been one of my favorite bands, or at least for the last 30 some years. And one of the reasons why they're high on my list is because of how eclectic their music was.
was yes.
Well, yes, they went everywhere. I mean, they were curiosity, to the nth degree, went wherever they wanted to go, whether it was folk or classical or jazz or rock or blues or everything in between, just straight up pop. And I admire any artist who can do that. And what I find in your work is it's hard to classify, and I like that. There's so much of what you do. There are elements of jazz and pop and progressive rock and some classical, and there are electronic elements and pop, and well, I mentioned pop, but there are some parts of your music that remind me of Chicago or Steely Dan, but then there is some kind of like vocal music, like you said, Barry Manilow. There's a smoothness to and a roundness to the melodies that you create, and yet you have harmonic intricacies in there that those people don't have. So there's this kind of conceptual layering of the way that you're putting your music together, and yet at the same time, have you ever heard of a band called Sparks?
Oh, you put me on the spot. I'm going to say no, I have not.
Okay, so I hadn't either until a couple of years ago. They are two brothers from California who have been putting out albums for 50 years.
Wow.
And they have gone everywhere in their career in terms of the style of music. They've tackled pretty much everything you can think of in a very similar way that you have, but with their own kind of flavor. And the way you sing in sometimes reminds me of their vocals, which first of all, tells me, I think I would love to know your opinion of this band, because I listened to their whole catalog a couple of years ago, as I do that from time to time. I just pick an artist, listen to their whole catalog. And there are artists from the 80s and 90s who say that they have been hugely influenced by Sparks, and yet nobody knows who they are. And it's partly because I think they're so eclectic, they're so weird in some ways. They didn't stick to one genre, that nobody knew what to do with them, especially the industry, which is so narrow-minded, But the other thing it tells me is that you had mentioned before that you've never been very confident with your own voice, or there's a certain way that you think someone hears it in a certain way, or that you think of your songs as a demo instead of an actual full recording, which maybe there have been or will be people who come in and do vocals for you, and that's wonderful too. But at the same time, your voice is lending a character to everything you do that nobody else has. And you can say, we don't know who wants to hear our music. We don't know who needs to hear the music. There's a school of thought, which on my good days, I believe, and then there are bad days, which is that if you are compelled to create something, if that is inside you, it's because the energy of the world is asking for it. And there's not anybody else in the world who can do what you do. And I can say in spades, having listened to dozens of your songs, that there isn't anybody else in the world who can do what you do.
Well, that one of the things is, like, when you write a song, it's like there's only so many chords. I mean, it's like what you're basically dealing, unless you're getting microtonal, you're dealing with the same 12 notes that Mozart used. So there's only so many combinations. I mean, there's actually an infinite number of combinations, but most of those are going to sound, unless you present them a certain way, not too good. I mean, if it was just randomly generated. So there's got to be an intelligence behind it. But so a lot of my songs are built on these kind of, I usually start with a progression, or like just kind of fooling around, and I build my songs in the most unusual ways. The way I do it now is I tend, if I'm doing it on piano, because if I do it on guitar to start, turns out to a different kind of song. Mm-hmm. But I'll be playing, there'll be a bass line, there'll be the chords and some kind of melody, because I'm not just playing chords. But then I said, okay, well, now that's the keyboard part now. But I'm not just going to sing the melody in the keyboard part. So I end up writing a counter melody to that. So I'm already doing this very contrapuntal, fancy word, just having more than one melody at the same time. And I don't know, I just find, well, how many other people do that? I mean, it's like the end of the Beach Boys, God only knows. Yeah. I mean, it's like, why isn't there more? I mean, so there's some times in my songs where I'm not trying to sound like that, but that kind of thing, which used to be much more common, centuries ago. So it's kind of an older way to think about writing music. And I just try to get away with what sort of things can I get away with in a pop song. Because I mean, a lot of the stuff I'm doing is rooted in pop now. I mean, I guitar, drums, keyboards, whatever. And, can I sneak a Neapolitan sixth chord or a German augmented sixth, or, how many jazzy chords can I fit in this without it actually being, jazz? So, and also because of the prog element, it's like how many different time signatures can I slip in there without people noticing or tripping over themselves if they try to dance to it? So another thing you mentioned, like the eclecticness nature of my music, And the irony is, the last couple albums, I've been trying to kind of be consistent,
Yeah.
like stick to a sound and a production, because my production will be all over the map and the styles will be all over the map. And I like that because I like, not just my musical taste where I will like Carole King, King Crimson, and
Ah,
the Carpenters and Jethro Tull, Frank Zappa, Radiohead and Talking Heads. And
mm,
so when you get, I don't think I've ever done a prog masterpiece like, Genesis Supper's Ready. I feel like someday I'm going to do a straight up prog masterpiece, but somehow I got stuck in, stuck is maybe not the right word because I kind of like it, but
mhm.
you had mentioned Steely Dan to kind of this kind of groove, like it grooves and it's got these lush harmonies, and it's just there's a lot. I feel like I'm when I'm listening to it, it's like it's you can't take it all on a first listen, but you feel satiated when you're done listening to it. There's a lot of calories in there. There's a lot of
Mm,
meat on the bone. And so I have this stuff here. So I have a virtual studio now. So
yeah.
this stuff was one of the most recent things is like I need to get some better keyboard sounds because I have a Korg M1 here from around 1990.
Yeah,
No more sounds in anymore, so everything has to be triggered.
that's right.
And so I ended up getting these keyboards. So I get these vintage Fender Rhodes and Wurlitzers and clavinets and things.
Oh,
So when you do that, I'm not going to be doing, some of the prog stuff I want to do. And so it seems to fit more comfortably in mid 70s Chicago or Steely Dan.
yeah, okay, I
So
see.
that explains a trumpet in there also. I thought, oh, let's do an album. I can't play the trumpet to save my life, but I fooled you, right?
Sounds great.
I would spend a day, and my wife can tell you if she hears me burr. And it's like, don't worry, it's going to sound like something when I'm finished.
Yeah, yeah.
So most of the songs on the last album have, 3-part brass harmony. And what was I thinking? Just to give it a color, just to give it a unified sound. And so that maybe gives you a Chicago vibe, the fact that, it's got brass on it. But most of my albums, that's kind of atypical if you go back over the years.
And I think you're right. I mean, at least for the album this most recent album, there is kind of a sonic cohesion to it. I've heard so much of your stuff that does go in plenty of places. Now, each individual song has its complexities, and some with the horns and even vocal harmonies, great layers. But I do feel like from beginning to end, there's a sound that you've achieved with that album that's pretty,
I kind of write down what my settings are. I mean, before I didn't do that, I would be like, okay, the drums, I would set up the mics and the EQ, like, I don't know. And I'd be starting from scratch every time. And so I'd like just be fumbling, searching for, well, that sounds cool. Let's go with that. So it'd be like, you buy a record and you have most of the time one producer, one engineer,
right.
and they're making it sound like a finished piece of project. But imagine if every single song was a different producer, a different recording
Yeah,
studio,
yeah.
different microphones, or they forgot what the settings were, and so they came up. It sounds like you're in a different space because this song has reverb, but this one doesn't. This one has echo.
Yeah.
So I've been trying to kind of be consistent in that approach. I mean, I like to think of it as if you had a kind of a jazz rock with a touch of prog to it. Um,
Yeah, I would say that's true. Yeah. I mean,
that's
some a little bit more of a touch than others, but yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's what it sounds like to me, you know. I I think too, we put all these rules and restrictions on ourselves. And I think there's a voice in each of our heads, except for maybe the very select few geniuses who don't, ever have that voice, who that voice is telling you to fulfill some kind of stricture that music needs to adhere to, even when you don't know that's happening. And it's one of the things I try to do now and then, not always, is to bust myself out of what I have been doing to make sure that there's not something else that I could be doing that I like even better. But the more you do it, and especially you've done so many albums, there's less of a sense, hopefully, of, well, am I doing this right, or is this going to sound like it should sound, or whatever, whatever you put together. If it sounds organic to you, if it sounds like it's working for you, then that is how it should sound. There's no real other requirement there.
That's the other thing. I have this love of kind of an analog sound. I'm doing everything digitally, and all of my, except for the drums, the guitars, and my vocals, and the trumpet. Well, I
Yeah.
guess that's most of it, but all the keyboards, bass, and it's all virtual synthetic. But the sounds I'm choosing, this style, it's still kind of, I rarely do sequence stuff. I have done some programming, computer-ish sounding stuff where it's, and that's usually where I say, okay, if I'm going to do that, then I'm going to do music that's, at my mind at the time, not humanly possible to play. I like to say, I like to see, and that's where the Zap in me comes out. Is like you come up with these these musical puzzles, and I like it. So I don't know why it wouldn't.
The thing is, as unique as we all are, we're not all that different. There, if we, especially with the internet, there might not be anybody or very few people in your immediate circle or even extended circle who have the same tastes as you do musically. But there are, I would say, minimum at least 1 million other people in the world, if not 10 or 100 million, who do, who somehow converge on many of the things that you like and that you find engaging musically. And it's a matter of finding them.
Yes, that's been my Achilles heel. Is I'm all the things I'm interested in doing, all the projects I've undertaken, what usually gets me in the end, even when, like my astrophotography, I tried my hand at selling photos or videos of it, but it's like getting the sales, getting the exposure. So that's where I kind of, but again, I'm being my own marketing. I don't have an agent. I don't have, I don't have, I guess in the old days, if you were lucky enough to have a contract, I wouldn't be worrying about that. Someone else that I'd be paying would be worrying about that. But then I'd have other pressures that I currently don't have, I guess.
Yeah. Well, it's always harder when you're doing everything yourself. I know what that feels like. So, and I think, and most artists don't have it's a different kind of mind and a different part of the brain that deals with things like abstracting what you do to the point where you understand what it looks like from afar, from someone else's purview, and can market it in that way so that you know exactly even the visuals that work or the words that need to be in an ad or things like that. That's a whole discipline in itself. It's a creative discipline in a way. And on the one hand, you would think artists might be really good at that, and maybe some are, but on the other hand, why should we have to be? Why, if what our passion is creating and sharing that creation, then it's for people who are good at the next step that should be handed off to. I think. I mean, you can do as much as on your own as you're good at, but I do business and other things, on the side. And some of what we've learned is if there's something you're doing that's not in your core, that you can become good at or can figure out how to do, but it's taking energy away from the thing that really is your passion that you want to do, then the best thing you can do is to find somebody else to do that. And we're people who, well, shit, I need a flute on one of my songs. I'll just learn to play the flute. Fine. Or whatever it is, that can be fun, but at the same time, if that's not the thing you want to do, then just find somebody to do that. And yeah, that costs money. It takes time. So there are all these other factors that go into play. But I think that we're so hard on ourselves and not working that part of it, that we forget that we're already doing so much.
I mean, that reminds me that I had an open invitation with several people to sing some of my songs, but it just never panned out because, life gets in the way and you have your jobs and we're not physically near each other. But of course, with technology now, musicians don't even have to be in the same country, sharing files and just add your track to it, and
Yeah.
do as many takes as you need. But so yeah, I mean, I don't know if you noticed on the last album there was a female vocalist, and that's actually because there was a period where I was able to get a few other people involved. In the album before that, I have some guest guitar spots, but these I lifted directly from the tracks because they're remakes from the late '90s.
Right.
So I decided this song needs a facelift, so I redid it, but I kind of shuttled in those original performances from the people I had helping me out. So, and I kind of shared it with them, and see how, it sounds much better now, or at least I think it does. But with my venture into this now, it's like I have my doctoral essay, which is a piece for orchestra.
Yep.
Is like I was always very like if I'm going to write a piece, it's going to get performed and recorded.
Yes.
At least once, ideally more, but at least once. And that in the back of my mind, that piece that, because, once I left college, I didn't have the playground, the arsenal, the musicians there. Were you going to like go to Bob's orchestra and just, store and say, yes, I'd like you to perform this for me. I mean, it can be done. I have a friend who like went out to the Czech Republic or something. Oh yeah, they'll you pay them, they're a pretty good deal. But I'm thinking with the way virtual instruments are now, at some point, I'll say, you know what, in my free time, I'll program it or something and hear it that way. But that's the only rarity of mine that hasn't seen the light of day from 20 years ago, is a piece for orchestra.
That's incredible. That is incredible. Yeah. Now, and so speaking of complexity and being that prolific, there is you talked a little bit earlier about how music is not often as layered or as, contrapuntally intricate as it used to be in many ways. And there's some music out there that still does that, but on the whole, especially in the pop landscape, that's not something that is, it's well known for, if at all. The thing that I connect that back to, weirdly enough, is part of your story when you mentioned that you would take a cassette player and you would be able to bounce your tracks and do your overdubbing by playing whatever you had already done through the speakers and then layer on top of that. And that's how I started too, until I got my first 4-track and, and then I had to do some bouncing with that too, if you wanted more than 4 tracks. And then of course with digital, the sky's the limit as long as your processor can handle it. It's amazing to me what musicians and creators in particular will do to get an idea out of their head, even if the technology that they have at hand isn't there yet. And I think that applies to the layering that you do, but it also applies to the fact that you sing as well, but you play so many instruments yourself.
Well, again, it's out of necessity. I wish I were a better performer. I feel like, I mean, drums were my first instrument. So I'm always, I'll do a session a few days of going down and I got the song. I have to have it, song all figured out. Unless I'm doing, very rarely I do a loops thing, but usually I play the song and I have to have it, in my head or play along to like a MIDI recording, because I have, how many people like actually write the notes down to their songs. So I wasn't sure if you could see that.
I didn't know it was yours though. That's
yeah, boxes and boxes and boxes of sheet music. But so vocals is my current hurdles. Like, okay, and I always get in a place where it's like, oh man, I'll listen to people that I shouldn't be listening to. I mean, Tom Waits, like I got into Tom Waits a while ago. So there's someone to aspire to if you're not really going to be, like a Frank Sinatra crooner, because that's not what his aesthetic is. But at the same time, I got into Joni Mitchell and like, well, not only the female voice versus mine, but the way she used to sing was just, unbelievable. And my latest bug is I discovered Scott Walker. So I'm listening, and he's interesting because from the Walker Brothers. So on the ride down and up today, I was listening to his first four albums from the '60s, where he's got a full orchestra. It's beautiful, and singing in a crooner style. But if I had that kind of baritone voice, it's like, what kind of music would I be? So
Interesting.
that's that kind of stuff I think of. It's like, well, okay, it inspires me to write something for that kind of voice, but then it's up to me to actually realize it. And so the final product turns out a little bit different. It is what it is. It's got my personality and everything, but
Yeah.
all things being ideal, you know. Ooh.
Yes. Do you think you write to your strengths, or do you write whatever you want to write and then just do it the way you do it?
I think the second way. I mean I have habits, and habits are hard to break. So it's always a good idea to write a piece for a percussion ensemble where you're not dealing with chords or anything. You're just things you hit,
Yeah.
unpitched. That kind of used to cleanse my palate.
Mm.
But I realize, if I'm I'm going to do something that bears some resemblance to a rock song, it's going to have certain things in it. So I'm not going to go that far off. It's not going to. I can only bring so much liggity to a pop song without it becoming completely avant-garde. And I do that now and then for fun. It's not everyone's cup of tea, but I mean, ultimately, if it's on my recording, I did it somehow, whether I did it well or not. So so yeah, if I do guitar stuff, I mean, I can only do so much with guitar. So I and sometimes it's really difficult. Like I have this idea, and to execute it is quite a bear. But I somehow pull it off. Or sometimes I'll compromise. Okay, and that's not working, and So it's really an artifact, these recordings I make. They're kind of these sculptures, and maybe it was supposed to be a tree and the branches fell off and now it's a bush or something. Maybe it kind of changed as I was making it, and I didn't know what it was going to be until it was finished or near completion.
I find that to be better anyway, because if it's just like with novelists. Some novelists are able to write an outline and from beginning to end write the whole book. That's how it was. And others let the characters or the plot kind of guide them along into where it's going to go next. And if they tried to stick to an outline, it would kill the energy of the book. It would kill the flow or the truth of the book. And I think music can be the same way.
So I bet. Not that I'm doing as much of it as I used to. Like this, getting back to this being my pandemic album. It was only that because the opportunity presented itself, and I know a lot of other musicians did this as well. It's like suddenly you're not at work, or you don't have to drive to work because it's virtual. So last March, I found myself with a little bit more time on my hands. Normally, I would do this in the winter time when I'm not outside in the vineyard most of the time. And so since I didn't get to that last December, January, February, I didn't think I was going to do one. When that happened, I thought, oh, well, I have a couple songs. Maybe I'll write a couple more and then pick some songs to redo, that I feel like didn't get their fair shake the first time around. So and mix them up. So that's kind of like what I've been doing.
Yeah.
My recipe in the last couple albums is have some new stuff and some old stuff, given new, what would that song from the 80s or 90s sound like if I have what I have now and know my production technique and actual guitar
Yeah.
overdub properly without all this static and background noise.
That's very cool.
I would like to do collaborations. So, I mean, because you heard my stuff, I heard your stuff too. And, whenever I hear another musician, I mean, especially someone who, because you hear stuff on the radio and what passes for commercial, and you kind of know what to expect. I'm very seldom surprised. So when I hear someone else, it's like, oh man, look what they're doing. It's like, and I guess is what, if someone's trying to talk to me while music is on, even if I'm in a department store or shopping, and they'll say something to me and I'm listening to, oh, do you hear who that? Oh, it's like,
Totally. Yes. Yes.
so it's been commented, like when I listen, the way I listen to music, it's like I listen to the music. I'm following the bass line or, the percussion parts and the layers of it. Is that one or two people or three people or,
Right.
So anyway, I'm listening to your stuff and the sounds you're coming up with, the production and your singing. And I mean, I have to say, I wasn't sure if I'd have the opportunity, but I am in the fan club, you see. So
wow, one of my interview subjects, actually.
yeah.
So
But so since I heard him sing before I heard your material, I was interested to see, how far the apple fell from the tree. It's like, you got the genes, and I hear James Taylor's son sing. My gosh, it sounds like James Taylor or Julian Lennon. You hear, I mean, because just the structure of the nose and the throat and
absolutely, yeah, and how you use your voice, yeah.
But you're in a different. I mean, I think you've done some things, or some of his material or songs in that vein. But you kind of you're probably making the wise choice when you have artists who are related that I mean, that's another discussion. Is like
Right.
eking out your own identity. You don't want to do the same style. I mean, I don't even know if I mean, I'd have, if you did an interview with him, there were a bunch of questions. It's like, well, who is the arranger? And like, how do you pick the songs that you came up with? Like how much say did you have in that? Like, or if you had a song idea, would they let you? Or, oh no, you're under those contracts. And it's a whole different world that, just because we're musicians, that experience of being in the game and it's your living and it's a business, this is the business that we're in.
Yeah.
Business like business. So when you're at that level, just the consideration, the experience is like not, it's like the difference between someone who works in a grocery store and someone who works in a farm in a field. There might be a bag of frozen peas at the end of it, but one is not like the other at all. And so
it's interesting, yeah. And to even find those parallels, what popped into my head is the difference between, and these are maybe odd connections, but you have Frank Sinatra and Frank Sinatra Jr. He pretty much was trying to do what his dad did, right? But then you have James, I think it was James McCartney and James Paul McCartney. And his dad was a musician, a working musician for years. He had his own band and everything. And Paul just went in a completely different direction. And it was a wise choice, And so sometimes I guess I watched that Bee Gees documentary a couple of months ago. And one of the things that Barry said was that there's nothing like singing with your own relative, especially if it's a sibling or a parent. Because like, as you said, the way the voice and the body is structured, there's a certain, you can mesh harmonically better than you could with somebody else in the world, most likely. So even though a lot of what I've done is nothing like what my dad has done, when we do sing like that, our voices sound really good together, you know, which is a real treat.
Yes, yeah, that's something I wouldn't, that's the other thing. There's really no other musicians in my immediate family. So
Oh, interesting.
I didn't come that, like I said, I often wonder, well, why was I interested? Because, you know,
Well, I'll tell you this. Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
I mean, I don't really, I can't really explain it. It was just something that fascinated me. Like, how do you, I don't know. I just wanted to see how it was done, and I'm doing it.
Yeah, you are. You're doing it all over. And you know, when you consider that there are people getting paid a whole lot more than any of us are to do this or to do anything, and some of their motivations often are they're passionate about what they do, but sometimes it's a job and they're getting paid for it and they're going to keep doing it. For people who are doing it or not making a full living at it, or you know, that type of income, there's no other reason but desire, you know, and passion. And so wherever that came from, that's, you know, even if you took a couple of years off here or there, it's still so connected with you. It's something that you can't not do.
Right. Well, there's probably going to be a lot more off years. I mean, I could say, I mean, I don't think there's nobody demanding when's your next album going to come out. I mean, gosh, this one's still, the paint isn't dry on it yet, but even though it's a year ago almost.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it was summertime by the time I was finished. So, you know, with the grape growing, I mean, that's my next big, like, okay, this is something, I mean, we didn't really talk about that much, but
well, I actually want to get to that, but I want to say one thing really quickly, which is we're going to have well, I do this, but it's probably going to be over email. I think whether it's collaboration or something else, since my weakest instrument, or the instrument I feel most self-conscious about and don't have access to, is the drums, you know, and now and then you're looking for a vocalist. I would love to maybe trade and have you do some drums on some stuff that I'm doing, and I would love to sing for you.
but you have great drumming on your, I mean, yeah, if I
Well,
had,
that's all, you know, sampled. So it's live drums, but it's me piecing it together myself. So, you know, I have an instinct for it, but I can't play it. Yeah.
you'd have to trust me to be able to record it properly, or unless you can do the magic.
Oh, well, everything you've sound that if it's you playing on your recordings, it sounds great. So yeah,
I mean,
I'd be up for that.
it took me forever to get a good bass drum sound, and I still don't have, like,
Mm.
to get a good snare bass drum sound. You think, what's the big deal? You're hitting this thing that sounds like, you know, it shouldn't be that complicated, but
Oh, it is. Yeah. I remember my studio days where I worked in actual sitting in front of my computer studios. The amount of effort they go through to mic something properly, it's incredible. Just the kind of mic itself and the placement and what else is in the room. I love all that, but I was always glad somebody else was doing it. So, you know, go ahead.
yeah, I mean, like, I kind of planted the seed for that. Like, you know, it's like, that would be cool to do a collaboration, because there's a bunch of guys out there who I've have done things with or would like to, and it's, well, we'll get around to it, and sometimes it happens and sometimes it doesn't, but
Yeah.
But I do realize, I mean, because of the way I've been doing it for so long on my own, it's kind of, I kind of paint myself in a corner sometimes, because I've had the comment before that, when people listen to my stuff, well, it sounds like it's the same guy playing everything. When you get a band playing together, I mean, live at the same time, there's like the hardest thing is like syncing up what you recorded on drums to then the other instruments. Like the feel is, because every little subtle change in tempo or, and dynamic, you can respond and adjust immediately to. So when you're playing live with someone or rehearsing that way, bass and drums or something is different than doing one at a time.
Yeah.
So, but what I've ended up doing, I've got like 3 different keyboard parts. I got drums. I have 6, I got tambourine, shaker, and triangle, and three different brass, and I have my voice double tracked, and then I've got 3-part harmony, and then there's 2 or 3 guitar. You know, there there'd be no way I could pull this off live, even with a band. It's like, how would I even?
Yeah, yeah. That would take a lot of time and probably money to get those people together. You're like 30-piece band.
Where's the sheet music for it? It's like, oh my goodness, like
I don't even want to know. Yeah, that's it. Yeah. Well, those are things for us to definitely connect on. We're, I say, out of time. I don't know. Nobody's keeping a clock. I'm trying to keep this around an hour, and I wanted to touch on this before we go because it's been staring everybody in the face. Tell us a little bit more about your vineyard.
all right. Well, the vineyard is currently situated on my father and grandfather's old farm, um, at least a 4-acre parcel of it, and it's almost filled up now. And I started first planting was 2012, broke ground, as they say, and so the oldest plants are almost a decade old. They'll be 9 years old this year. A few years before that, my wife has thousands of books. She sells books and antiques, and so one day we went for here's a weird synergy. We were up at Cherry Springs in Upper Pennsylvania. I forget the name of the county. And you're out there camping in an open field, and you've got tent, and it's freezing at night, and what do you do during the day? And so there was a field of dandelions, and one of the books we brought was Wild Edibles, and so foraging for when you're in the wild, and it happened to have a recipe for dandelion wine.
Mm. Oh.
So we said, okay, well, let's try that. So we picked a whole bag of dandelion flowers and put it, went back home when we were all done our astronomying, and I followed the recipe. I used bread yeast, which is not the yeast to use. Did it in an open crock pot, and we like to say it came out horrible, but we drank it because we made it, and it was like, yeah, we made, and it's like had a kick to it. It's like, okay, what else can you make wine out of? So going to the store and buying any kind of fruit juice.
Ooh.
So I mean, I was making wine out of just about everything, and then I started getting a little bit more, serious. And actually, within the year or two after that, I was making wines. I was in a winemaking club and entering some contests and getting some feedback. And I have some batches that don't turn out right, but I got a basement, make racks in the I'm running out of room to store it all. But
Oh, wow.
so all this while I'm saying, well, if I want to, do this big time or small time, I don't know, but got to have some grapes. So I said, well, let me start by planting some grapes. So I planted my first 100 vines, and every year I planted more and more. So now I have over 3,000 vines and over 3 acres. And it's quite a bit to go out there and prune and train, and in the summertime you got to spray, mow, and all that stuff. But but in late summer, fall, harvest time, I pulled about 4 tons last year. And so a lot of wineries in South Jersey is where I sell it to. I reserve some for myself to keep practicing and have some, but most of that I sell to wineries, which some people may have heard of.
Nice.
And hopefully they make a good product with it.
That's exciting. It's exciting, as exciting to me as the music. My fiance and I have been watching this show on CNN hosted by Stanley Tucci, and he's touring Italy. And yeah, well, so now, I'm like, well, I have to have wine in the house now, even though, he's going to get to a point where he's going to talk about wine. Just and I know we have another vineyard in the family, the DiMatteo vineyard, and it's just, oh yeah.
I have not determined how or if they're related.
They are, that's interesting because they do the family reunion there every now and then, and my parents go, so there must be some relation somehow. So,
4,000 people, I have not made the connection. So
Wow. Well, you're the expert. You are the pro in that. You know what? What I'd like to know, and we can talk about this offline, is I bumped into a DiMatteo fashion online that's based in Naples. And I'd love to know if I'm sure there's maybe a very, very distant relation, but I'd love to know what kind of relation there is, if any, to those people. So I might talk to you about that at some point.
yeah, you can't always go by, the last name. They could be Di Matteo. It's just,
Right.
I mean, I don't know if it's as common as Smith, but doesn't necessarily mean.
There could be, that's, yeah, you'd have to go back hundreds of years or
I
more.
mean, there's other Castellis if you just search online, and I found out during the family tree that my great great, I don't know if it's two or three greats, this guy was abandoned in a basket, and I have the document in Italy. So there's this orphan child wrapped in rags. They gave him the name Paolo Castello.
Wow.
Who knows what my real name should have been?
Yeah.
That's one branch of genealogy. I can't go further back. I mean,
Oh, incredible.
but without knowing, what that family name is. So if there's other Castellis out there, they're probably, the Castellis you could fit in one room. Out of
Yeah.
all the people, there's only
Huh.
about 40 of us.
That's incredible.
But
Well,
the matter is, you don't have to worry about. You could fill a convention hall.
yeah. I've been told that. Well, so we could go on and on and on, and I've loved every minute of this. I'm going to put links up to a bunch of this stuff so that everybody can explore a little bit more. I know I'm going to be exploring more, and especially, when things open up a little more, would love to try your wine. That's something I'd be very excited to do. But thank you so much for sitting with me and talking with me. It was great. I appreciate it.
Nick, it was not only a pleasure talking to you and finally talking to you in person after a fashion, but it was also a great honor for you to have even asked me to do this. And especially, there's some hard acts to follow that you've interviewed recently. So
Oh, well, that's very nice of you to say, but I'll tell you all this. Listen to his music, you'll understand why. It's not just that we're related. There's a reason why I spent an hour with him today. But yes, thank you so much. And thank all of you for listening and watching and clicking and sharing and all the things I normally say. I hope you enjoyed this hour. And that you have some comments or questions either for Jim or for me or about any of these subjects that we've talked about, because as always my objectives here are music, conversation, and connection. Thank you everyone, and I will see you next time.